Alright, hello guys, welcome back. Time for another one, US history. We're moving right along. We have made it past World War I now, and we're ready for the 1920s, which is super exciting. This is a really good topic because it's actually we finally reached some good times in America. Everything we've kind of been talking about, you know, it's had its set of problems and everything. And this time, we don't really have too many problems in this set of standards to talk about. Not a whole lot of government issues going on, that corruption of the Gilded Age, we kind of leave that in the past. It's definitely still there, but we're not talking about it as much anymore. And now we get to talk about kind of the good stuff, the golden age of the 20s, the roaring 20s as they're called. And what we're going to see is that the United States is now, we're done with World War I, and we're going to focus on ourselves at home, and we're going to advance, and we're going to make advancements in electricity, new inventions, and lots of good stuff. Radio, movies, celebrities, fun stuff, okay? The big set of standards that we're going to go through, we're going to start with 29, and we're going to go all the way up to 34 or 35, I believe. And we break up the 20s into two different groups where we talk about all these new inventions and everything. And we've also got some really big cultural changes that we'll discuss. And we'll have a separate lesson the following week, so next week. What it will be over the changes that involve race in American history, because the 1920s are really going to kickstart some changes with African Americans leaving the South in large numbers, moving to cities, and going to be some big major changes involved with that. So we split the 20s up into kind of this golden age of culture, and then we move on to the social and political aspects after that. Let me see how we're looking as far as the screen. Make sure no glares or anything. I think it's looking pretty good. And let's jump right in. So the first topic we got to talk about, radio movies and the rise of country and blues music. So nice, fun, and easy topic, okay? So first thing, radio and movies. Radio is a new invention in American history at this point because here's the deal. In history, war changes things, and World War I changed things because war creates new technologies. Each side creates new things in order to try to win the war, and one of the things that was created was radio, and now radios are going to become more widely available, and lots of people are going to have a radio in their house. And then movies, the creation of movies is going to create a popular culture. And we'll learn about celebrities such as Charlie Chaplin. He's the silent film actor with the little mustache and the little bowling hat. Charles Lindbergh is a very famous pilot. He is the first pilot to fly across the Atlantic nonstop. And then, of course, Babe Ruth, the most famous sports star who ever lived. Okay, baseball player. All right, ready? Here we go. Remember, email me if you need to. Pause the video as needed. You can visit my website and download all this stuff. And let's check it out. Rock and roll. So like I was saying, America in the 1920s is a prosperous nation. That means we're doing really well. There's a lot of money going around, okay? World War I's over. Americans are like, wow, we survived this big bad war. Let's go home and let's just kind of have some fun. If you remember when you were in 7th grade, when you learned about medieval history, when they had the Black Plague and all that, once that was over, immediately after you have the Renaissance, or shortly after you have the Renaissance. Kind of the same deal in America. We survived World War I and we go home and we say, let's celebrate being alive. Let's listen to music. Let's hang out. Let's do some leisure activities. That's where you just go out and have fun. There's no real purpose behind it. There's no work that you're doing right then. You're just having fun and entertainment. And one of the big things is radio, okay? So I'm going to show you some pictures. People listening to the radio. And what's cool about this is that, like, I don't really, times change and everything, but really they don't change, because I've seen a lot of you here at school, you're listening to music or watching a video on your phone or something, and you'll share a headphone, or you'll split the headphones, and each one will have one in another ear. So we change and we do different technologies and things, but really humans don't change all that much, which is kind of cool, all right? So gather around the radio at night. So, things change with American culture because of this, and specifically with American entertainment culture. So of course they're going to play music on the radio, obviously, but things like sporting events, you could tune in and hear stories, you could hear the weather, you could hear the news, all kinds of stuff is going to start going out on the radio. And this is really going to change culture, okay? Because not only that, you're going to have popular musicians and popular types of music, but now everybody's going to understand what's going on around America. So for the first time ever, America is going to have a real American culture that's created. Something brand new that we didn't have before. Because before it's all the states and they're all separated, right? And we don't know what's going on in Kentucky, or we don't know what's going on in Alabama or Virginia or Georgia or whatever. But now, because of the radio, things get reported on, and you can be like, oh, so that's what's happening in Mississippi today, or that's what's happening in New York today, or whatever, okay? So we now got what's called a shared culture because of the rise of radio, all right? So there you go. So you can hear stories, you can hear music, sports, whatever, okay? So there we go. And so, well, like I said, this creates a sense of community. It creates a common experience. And this is for the first time in America. This is something brand new. They had never had this before. America was one nation, yes, the United States. But because we weren't all connected all the time, we were really not all that united. But because of the radio, now we understand, oh, Washington, D.C., oh, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he's president. He's going to get on the radio every night and talk to us, which he did, by the way. It's called a fireside chat, something Franklin Roosevelt did. This comes much later. We'll talk about that later. But the radio, like I said, creates a common experience, creates a true American culture, and that's something brand new. And that's one of the really cool things about the 1920s. And another thing that happens technologically is movies. Movie attendance goes way, way up because now people can go to the movies and it's something to do. Before, there's not much to do going on in the cities at night, if you're not an adult. But now everybody goes to town at night and everybody goes to watch a movie. And check it out, it was really cheap. It says for only a quarter, you could go see 2 different movies. Man, if you saw 2 movies nowadays, I don't even know how much movie tickets are anymore. I haven't been to the movies, probably like, if you saw 2 movies, that would be at least $20 plus snacks and everything. You're looking at like a $60 night easy, okay? So movie attendance, people loved going to the movies. I'm going to show you some pictures. And they have really fancy theaters. Look at all these people at the movies. Man, oh man, okay? And so there you go, and you see, really, really cool. And it's all about going to the movies, having that experience. And it creates a cultural thing, okay? So now we get a true American pop culture for the first time ever, which is really, really cool. All right? There we go. And because of this, we get some celebrities. And the first one is this guy, Mr. Charlie Chaplin. He is a silent movie actor. He's also director, storyteller. He's got all, he's a man of many hats. Haha, there's his hat, there you go. Charles Lindbergh, first guy to fly across the Atlantic Ocean in an airplane by himself nonstop. And this is a huge deal. It makes this big famous thing that happens, and he becomes a big world celebrity. Gets really, really famous. And then, of course, Mr. Babe Ruth, the king of baseball. There you go. Celebrities. So like I said, Charlie Chaplin, most famous actor of the 1920s, silent movies. He was director, he was the star, he was the editor, he's the producer. He did it all, okay? And of course, he's got the very famous look of the loose pants, the mustache, and the hat, okay? So there he is. He grew up very, very poor. His mother abandoned him and had a lot of issues. And he became an actor at a very young age and worked his way up and became pretty much one of the most famous actors of all time. His face is recognizable. I feel like most people would see this and be like, oh yeah. Even if you didn't know his name, you had seen him before. Okay, so that's Charlie Chaplin. All right, Charles Lindbergh. Like I told you, very famous solo transatlantic flight. Transatlantic means across the Atlantic. He's the first person. He flew from New York to Paris, France. It took him 33 hours, nonstop. They said he got lost on the way, but he just flew down low so that he could see the landforms, and he finally figured it out. And just an instantly famous person overnight for doing this. He had been a pilot most of his life. He flew mail, so the U.S. was really rural at the time, and there weren't roads to get everywhere, so he would fly mail places. And so when he does this big famous event, and he becomes a celebrity. Then he moves to Europe. Actually, his kid gets kidnapped. One of his kids gets kidnapped and murdered, and it's this big Charles Lindbergh scandal. You can look into that if you want to. Really sad story. But he moved to Europe later in life, and real famous guy. Okay, Charles Lindbergh, first solo flight across the Atlantic. And then, of course, George Ruth, aka Babe Ruth. He is America's first and probably biggest all-time celebrity. I know that his sports memorabilia, like jerseys and stuff from him, still go for lots and lots and lots of money. George Babe Ruth is the home run king, most famous athlete of the day, and probably the most famous of all time. And it's because of the radio. On the radio, they would broadcast Yankee games or whatever team he was playing for at the time. He played for the Yankees the longest, but he did play for other teams. But anyway, he hit like 60 home runs in a season, and just one of the greatest of all time. Okay, there's Babe Ruth. All right, so now we're ready. So how did the prosperity of the 1920s affect American daily life? So what do people start doing? They start to spend money on leisure and entertainment. Americans spent money on leisure and entertainment. And what that means specifically, movies and radio. So going to the movies, listening to the radio, just kind of hanging out, getting some culture. Yeah. And then besides music, what types of broadcasts were sent to American homes via the radio? Obviously, you could hear the news. You could hear fictional stories. You could hear the weather. And very, very important, especially to the last thing we just talked about, sports broadcasts. Sports. Whoa, let me rewrite that one. Got a little weird there. It's been a few days since I had to do this. So there we go. Sports. Alright, let me check and look and see how we're doing. Make sure you can see it. I think that looks pretty good. Cool. Remember to pause it if you need it, and we'll rock and roll. So the 1920s, leisure and entertainment, movies, radio, they're listening to the news, they're listening to stories, sports, weather, etc. Alright, now, so what was the effects of radio and movies on American culture? For the first time ever, we have the creation of American pop culture, popular culture. So just this idea that there are celebrities that everybody knows, okay? And it's a shared experience. Everybody knows who they are. Just a cool time in American history, okay? Charlie Chaplin, famous silent movie star. Just to make sure you know who these people are, because they are in our Tennessee state standards. Okay? Lindbergh, first transatlantic solo flight. And transatlantic means across the Atlantic Ocean. First transatlantic solo flight. Took him 33 hours. It's a long time. He was by himself in an airplane. I bet that got a little boring. Alrighty, and then Babe Ruth. Most famous baseball star. Really most famous sports star at the time, but we'll just say baseball. Most famous baseball star of the era. Okay? So there we go. Looks great. Very good. Pause it if you need it. There it is. And I believe that about covers US.29. So radio and movies, they changed the game. We get celebrities, we get a popular culture, famous celebrities, Charlie Chaplin, Lindbergh, and Babe Ruth. So there we go. All right. So that was easy. So let's go ahead and move on to the next part. So we went over this, radio and movies, and now we're ready to talk about country and blues music. Now, we live in Tennessee, which is the home of country music because of the Grand Ole Opry, which is the famous country music venue in Nashville. All the famous country music stars have played there. And it's very relevant to us that we get to learn about this because Tennessee is home to country music. Mississippi is home to blues music, but of course Memphis is very close to Mississippi. And so Memphis plays a role too. And we'll learn about two people. W.C. Handy, he's the father of the blues. And then Bessie Smith, a female blues star. She's called the Empress of the Blues. So let's just rock and roll right now. All right, so country music. It is believed to have been born in the Appalachian Mountains out of bluegrass music. Bristol, Tennessee is believed to be the home place of country music. In 1927, there was a recording at a studio in Bristol, and the type of music that was played there had really never been heard before, but it was broadcast out, and people went crazy over it. The first country music stars were a guy named Jimmy Rogers, and then a family called the Carter family, and I'll show you some pictures of them right here. So So Jimmy Rogers is there, and there's the Carter family looking as happy as can be. I don't know why they don't smile. But anyway, the Bristol Sessions, like I said, is the first place where country music was recorded, way up there in the Smoky Mountains. And so it is, Tennessee is the home of country music. And that's the place now, it's a museum, okay? So Bristol, Tennessee, home of country music, birthplace. All right, now blues music came, like I said, from Mississippi, comes from the way deep south. And it's born out of the old slave culture. It was brought over from Africa, the old folk songs and spiritual songs that were sung on southern plantations by the slaves. And then it morphs into what we call blues because it's sang by primarily African American people who were experiencing deep poverty and sadness and hard times. And blues, you know, I've got the blues, it's marked by this sadness, okay? And it's a very kind of abstract type of form of music. You know, it can be some rock and roll, it can be some jazz, but it's always got this theme of like hard times and the guitar and things like that, okay? So it comes from Mississippi, but it becomes famous because of places like Memphis and Nashville where it's recorded and played all over the radio, okay? So some really, you can see blues trail there, Nashville, Memphis, New Orleans, very important cities. Also Chicago, but we'll talk about Chicago later. Some very famous blues stars here. We've got, this is Robert Johnson. It's believed he sold his soul to the devil to learn how to play guitar, as featured in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? If you've seen that movie, it's a great movie. But anyway, Robert Johnson, the original blues singer who apparently sold his soul to the devil, like I said. This one is my favorite. His name is Mississippi John Hurt. He's got a nice, real soft voice, and he plays the guitar real well. And then Bessie Smith, this is her right here. She is known as the Empress of the Blues, okay? So there we go. All right, now, like I said, because of the radio, these two types of music become really, really popular. People really go crazy for this stuff, okay? It's great music. A lot of people still really like blues and jazz, or blues and country still today. Now, the Grand Ole Opry is in our standard, and what it is, I'll just show you a picture of it. It's a place in Nashville that they recorded country music out of. And one of the things I left out that you need to make sure you remember is a country radio station. It's called 650 AM, so it comes on AM radio, and the station is WSM, the country giant, all right? And it's been going on, they've been playing for years and years and years and years and years. Every Saturday night, I think maybe even Friday nights too, they broadcast out whatever is playing on the Grand Ole Opry or whoever is playing on the Grand Ole Opry. And they've been running since 1925, okay? So it's a long, long, long time, all right? And basically what they show off, it's mainly country. They do show some bluegrass, sometimes blues. Sometimes they get even some pop singers on there, okay? And people all over the world listen to the Grand Ole Opry. I was lucky enough to go to England a couple of times, and one of the times while I was there, I talked to a guy at a museum. He ran the museum, British guy, and he was like, "Man, have you ever been to the Grand Ole Opry?" And I was like, "Actually, I haven't." And he was like, "Oh, wow." He was like, "I listen to the radio. I listen to it on the internet every Saturday night." So it's pretty cool. Okay. So there you go, Grand Ole Opry, very famous country music venue, and there you have it. All right. Now, there are two people that you have to know about because of what the state of Tennessee says. W.C. Handy, he is considered the original father of the blues. That's his nickname. As a kid, he was not actually allowed to play music. His parents were really, really religious, and they were like, "Yo, you can't play music." But he learned to play music secretly, and he wrote it all down. And he is considered the person who took the blues and made it really, really popular. So we call him the father of the blues. So again, his name is W.C. Handy, father of the blues. So there you go. Made it very popular in America. And then Bessie Smith, she is actually from Tennessee, and she is considered to be one of the greatest blues singers of all time. And this is her right here. She was a pretty controversial star. She would dress kind of what we'd call risque for back in the day, and would sing and dance, and it would be a great performance. Unfortunately, she didn't live to be very old, only, 43? And she was killed in a car accident in Mississippi, so it's pretty sad. But Empress of the Blues, very famous blues musician, blues singer, star there, okay? All right, so let's write these down. The origins of country music. So it comes from Bristol, Tennessee. and then it was showcased in Nashville, which we'll get down to here. Origin of blues music comes really from Mississippi and Memphis. Memphis is very important in the blues scene. It still is today. Memphis, Tennessee, okay? And then what is the significance of the Grand Ole Opry and country music? Very famous. Country music venue. A venue is the place where you play music. Country music venue. And longest running country radio show. Country radio show. So there we go. There's that. Let me take a look, make sure you can read it just fine. That looks good. Very good. And we're about 20 minutes in, which is perfect. All right, so there we have that. Pause it if you need it. Email me if you got questions. Download this thing on my website. And then we got W.C. Handy and Bessie Smith. W.C. Handy, he is called the father of the blues, because remember, he learned how to play blues himself. He wrote down a lot of the famous blues songs, recorded them, and he kept them alive for musical history, which is really cool. And then Bessie Smith, she is called the Empress of the Blues. Empress of the Blues. So there we go. She's a very famous blues singer from Chattanooga, Tennessee, who unfortunately didn't live very long. And yeah. There we go. And you can look up both of these people's music. Bessie Smith's music is pretty funny. She's got some pretty funny songs. Some of them are a little more adult, I would say, just some of the themes. I'm not going to go into any details, but you feel free to look them up and let me know what you think. So there you go. All right, I've got to pull up the next PowerPoint. It's actually two separate PowerPoints. So give me just a second, I'll get that going. Don't go away, I'm coming right back, back. La 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 la. Where is it? There it is. Sorry, I didn't have it prepared. Okay, now we're ready. If it'll load. Jeez Louise. Okay, here we go. So now we're going to move on to US.29, and US.29 is also very, very just like these others. It's all about new things in America and how things change. And this PowerPoint is a little bit different. It's kind of short and it's just like bullet points. You'll see what I mean in just a second. But we're going to talk about new technologies, and there's a lot of new technology because, like I said, after a war, there's always new technologies because they're figuring out how to make new cool stuff. And electricity. Electricity is going to be a game changer. More and more people are going to have access to electricity because the United States is becoming more modern in the 20s, and that's going to change up everything. So let's rock and roll. All right, so some of the new stuff of the 1920s are the automobile, the airplane, the washing machine, refrigerators, the recliner, the Band-Aid, electric shaver, a toaster. Excuse me, see, I got choked up. I got so excited about all these new technologies. All of this becomes possible because of the spread of electricity. Now, the automobile and airplane, that's because of gas. But you see what I'm saying is that there's discoveries, they're figuring out a better way to do things, and they're figuring out that life can be a whole lot better. And that's the theme here. Life becomes a whole lot better because of all these new inventions. New things, new fantastic, wonderful things. And like I just said, life gets a whole lot easier. And think about all the things that we use that use electricity. I mean, right now, electricity. Right now, the air conditioner's running, and that's making it nice in here, nice and cool. That's electricity. My phone, it's charged because of electricity. And so life gets a whole lot easier, and we still reap the benefits of that today. And now one of the things about this is, and we need to remember this is super duper, super important, and we've kind of already talked about it a little bit, but this right here, a consumer culture. And what that means is that people are now going to start buying things like crazy. People are, if you think about it, all you really need food, water, shelter, and a little bit of clothing. You don't need all the things that we have in America. It's wonderful that we do have all these things. Like, for example, it's great that I have a Nike sweatshirt. It's great that I have a watch and a bracelet and glasses and all this other cool stuff. But I don't need these things to be alive. And what that is, that's consumer culture. It's spending money on things that you don't need to survive. But here, and that's fine. I mean, it's just, that's the way we are. But here's the problem with this, is that now people are going to start going into debt in order to pay for these things. And if you know about the 1920s, in the 1930s, we're going to have the Great Depression. And it's going to go straight because of that right there. People taking advantage. They know what they want. They set up the terms, in other words, payments, and that's called debt. They go into debt. They're not paying for stuff now. They're going to pay for it later. And the problem with that is if you don't have a job, you can't pay for it, and that's going to be a major, major problem, okay? So remember this. Life gets better, and we get a new style of culture of people buying stuff they don't necessarily need, and the problem is they're going into debt to do it, and that's going to be a major issue later. So just remember that. Keep that in the back of your mind as we go through the 20s, okay? Now, things definitely get better as far as travel is considered. Larger and better airplanes, so now people are going to start traveling more. And we got Lindbergh, who we just learned about. He's going to fly across the Atlantic for the first time. And in 1929, we have an airplane that carries over 100 people. I'm not sure I would have gotten on that airplane in 1929 because I don't know if I would have trusted it. But, you know, it is what it is, okay? So airplanes traveling, people traveling more, people moving around. And electricity is going to become more advanced too. So now we've got people can work at night and they're making stuff all night long and people are going to start buying that stuff, okay? And life, like I said earlier, gets a whole lot easier because people have electrical appliances. Think about the beautiful thing of having an electric oven. You don't have to build a fire and cook your food over the fire and everything anymore. You can just flip a switch and make your meal right there. You don't have to gather firewood and go outside and all that stuff, okay? Think about a refrigerator. A refrigerator is a fantastic thing, okay, if you think about it. Just absolutely wonderful to have a nice cold drink of water, okay? All right, but anyways, there you go. So there's that. All right, so that covers the first standard that we got to go over. And notice the questions, all the questions are going to be at the end, okay? And we'll go over all those together, okay? So now we finally get to a new thing that we've been waiting on all year long, the automobile and Henry Ford. And he's going to change the game because he's going to figure out how to do something called mass production. And we'll go over that right now. All right? So this is Henry Ford right here and the very, very famous Model T. There it is right there. And the way he does it is an assembly line. Now, I know an assembly line makes sense today because it's been around since the 20s, but back then it's a brand new thing. And what an assembly line is you take this machine and you send it literally down a line. And you've got one person who their only job is to put the wheels on. You've got another person who their only job is to put the doors on. You got another person whose only job is to put the seats in, and so on and so forth. And that makes things go a whole lot faster. Rather than having one guy put a whole car together, you've got 15 guys working on one part at a time, and all of a sudden things get a whole lot faster. And because things are faster, you get a whole lot more cars available. So cars are very, very commonplace, and it gets cheaper, okay? So, because more cars are available, you got a whole lot more cars, they're a whole lot cheaper, and people are going to start buying them up like crazy. Remember, people are going into debt. Don't forget that. People are going into debt to buy cars. And now America is going to change big time. We're going to get more and better roads across America, such as Route 66, like in the movie Cars, that goes all the way across America. It's going to be a whole lot more money going around because people are going to be working in car factories, building these cars. And then if you think about it, you got to have mechanics to work on the cars. You got to have tire companies to make the tires. You got to have all these different parts companies to fix the parts and make the parts and all that stuff. You get car washes. You get all this whole big car culture that happens because of Henry Ford. So it's really fantastic. So America is just becoming a modern nation, which is awesome, okay? Now, people start traveling more, and when people start traveling, they start exchanging culture and ideas. And one big thing is something you guys really love is freedom for youth. You think about it now, instead of like, oh, I'm going to come over to your house and we're going to hang out, we might go on a walk or something. Now you can go jump in the car, drive over your friend's house, jump in, drive over somebody else's house, they jump in, and you just drive around and have fun, okay? So it's a freedom for youth, and you get a youth culture that develops, okay? And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So more freedom, more money, just overall better life in America because of the automobile. So you can see how things have really changed in America. We went from pre-World War I, where we're just kind of like this factory economy where everybody's just kind of working and it's kind of tough times and everybody's struggling, but things are getting better and better and better. Then World War I was really bad, everything's really, really bad, but then we win the war and we come out of the war and we're like, whoa, we're still alive? Let's have an awesome time and listen to the radio and watch movies and make cars and make money and buy stuff and just have a wonderful time and use electricity. And so America is definitely changing now. All right? All right, now, here's the deal. The credit system. Like I said, the credit system is good. That's going into debt. It's good because people now have stuff. But the problem is it's growing the debt, and this really gets out of hand with people. They start to get way more stuff than they'll ever be able to afford, and that's going to lead to a big problem in 1929 and the 1930s. But don't let me get ahead of myself. One of the best parts about this, though, is many more new jobs. You got all these car factories that pop up in like Detroit, Michigan, and all over the United States. And people are working, people are making money, and people are spending money. So America is changing, okay? And our economy is getting huge. All right, now, like I said, on society, it's a game changer, these cars. Look at these kids in here. Man, oh man, I would fuss at them given the option. If they were in the parking lot out here and tell them, hey, y'all need to put a seatbelt on. All right, so on society, people are traveling more, they're having more fun. People start to go on vacation, they're going to the beach, they're driving to California, they're going across America. And this changes things. Like I said, this changes culture. People drive to the city on the weekends. People drive out to the countryside for vacation. And these people are starting to meet each other. And we get what we call a true American culture, a shared experience, okay? Now, like I said a few minutes ago, we get a freedom for youth. The kids, the teenagers, they're getting in the car and they're driving around town, they're causing trouble, they're getting into mischief and just doing things, you know what kids do. Wild children, behave. All right, and now all of a sudden we have a need for safety regulations. Seatbelts don't come along for a long, long time, but we get things like speed limits, we get better roads, all that kind of stuff, okay? So automobiles really changed the game. We talked about radio and movies created a different culture. Cars really changed the culture, all right? And there you have it. Okay. So cool. Now we get to women. Women are really going to experience some big changes during this time, and there's a few reasons why. We're going to talk about this in a little while, but if you recall, in World War I, a lot of the men had to go to Europe to fight, and so it leaves a lot of jobs open for women, and when women go to work, they say, hey, I've got money, I've got more freedom now, I want to change up the way I think, I'm going to change up the way I act, I'm going to change up the way I behave, and that's fine. Change is usually a very, very good thing. And so what we're going to get to, and I'm going to show you this idea later, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce it now. It's an idea called traditionalism, which is kind of like old school thinking. Okay, it's kind of like the old way of doing things, and what you teenagers at home would call boomer type thinking. Okay, that's traditionalism. And then we get versus. So versus means against. Stupid board. Stupid electricity. I'm just kidding, I love electricity. Traditionalism versus modernism. Modernism. And this is new school, advanced thinking. So new school thinking, okay? So new school, I'll try that. So one of the things that this fits into, these women are going to be really into this right here. Women of the 20s, they love changes, they love things. And one of the ideas is flappers, okay? Flappers are a new type of women. I'm going to show you some pictures of them. A new type of women that emerged in the 1920s, okay? And really, women are going to embrace this big time, this modernism. And if you recall, in 1920, we get women's suffrage. So women's right to vote. So women are really expanding their amount of participation in society. They now are experiencing more equality. They're making money because they're going to work more. We get something that is awkward to talk about, but we're going to. Birth control. So that also gives them another level of freedom because they're not stuck having kids all the time. And women are also going to start to go to college, which is something way different that didn't happen before, okay? So modernism, new school kind of thinking, it's a change in the game for women, all right? And we'll talk about this idea more later. So let's jump right in. All right, now, so the flapper, and I think honestly, and I need to look this up, it's terrible that I don't know this, the origins of the word flapper, but I think it has to do with their haircut. So the flapper's haircut, it's short hair. And I've recently experienced the joy of short hair. I used to have long hair, but short hair, it gives you a whole lot more freedom. And women were like, wow, I can get my hair fixed in about 5 minutes and it's no problem. And it looks cool, brand new style. Fantastic, all right? So women like these short haircuts, and that's kind of the key characteristic of the flapper is this short little haircut that you see here. I think I've got some more pictures. No, I don't. Anyways, so they got a bobbed haircut, so that changes the game, changes up the style. They wear skirts now, shorter skirts, and what we would call risque clothing. And honestly, if these people saw clothing nowadays, they'd be like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. Because you can see their clothing that is so risque is really, it covers a lot compared to a lot of the stuff you see out in the world today, out in pop culture. Now, one thing that's different is these women, they smoked cigarettes and they drank alcohol. Whoa. Remember back then that they didn't want women doing this. Society said, women, you're supposed to stay at home. You're supposed to be the moral leader of the family. You are supposed to be the traditional lady and stay home and raise the kids. Don't wear this stuff. Have your long hair. You need to have it covered up. You know, you need to be the meek, humble woman that is not to be heard, only to be seen, all that sort of stuff. And women in the 20s, they're like, yo, while y'all were going off to war, we had jobs, we did what we wanted, we had fun, we have money now, we vote now. We're going to do kind of what we want. And so this is really cool that we get this new culture of women and they get this nickname called flappers, okay? And what they do is they really challenge norms. And one of the things that you're going to see on a lot of our tests is that they challenge, you'll see this wording, and I'm just throwing it out there so that way you remembered it. Challenge traditional norms and thinking. So back then, remember, like I said, it was expected for women to stay home and have strong morals and not wear clothing like this and not have a haircut like this. Definitely not smoking or drinking. But these women, they do what they want. They challenge the traditional norms. They challenge the rules. They say, hey, it's 1920, it's 1925. We're going to do what we want now, okay? So that's really great, all right? And one of the things that made them able to do this is because birth control became more of a thing then. I don't really want to talk about it because it's kind of weird, but now women, it gives them more freedom because now they can go have romantic relationships and they don't have to worry about, I've got to have a baby and get married and be stuck at home all the time. It gives them more freedom to change up the way they live their lives, okay? So, and it says that allows women more freedom of life outside the home, not being a mother, okay? And we're just going to keep rocking and rolling right through that. All right, now, so like we were talking about before during World War I, women worked in factories. But after World War I, those factory jobs kind of go away. They go back to the men. Remember, they're not having to make bombs and stuff all the time now. And they're like, we like working. What are some jobs that we can still do? And they do what we call kind of the traditional women's jobs. And I'm not being weird. I'm just talking about the subject. So secretaries, receptionists, a lot of teachers, a lot of nurses, a lot of social workers, and even still today, these fields, teachers, nurses, and social workers tend to be typically women. You've experienced this growing up. I'm sure that you probably have had more female teachers than male. I guess maybe I'm breaking tradition because I'm a male teacher. I don't know. Anyway, I just like teaching. And then some did still continue to work in factory jobs and usually working on textiles. Remember, textiles are clothing, okay? So pretty cool. Jobs women held in the 20s. All right. And then finally, they want to continue to seek better opportunities. They want to consider, doing different things. The 1920s, the women saw this as a time of opportunity. And a lot of them still went to college. And that's how they became teachers, nurses, things like that. And women's suffrage really, really was a game changer because then they started to fight for rights for themselves. Okay. All right. So there we go. And let's move right along. All right, last topic, and this is a weird topic. Let me see how much time we've been working on here. All right, perfect. We're going to try to keep it under an hour today. I think we can definitely achieve that goal. So we get to something weird here. It's the Scopes trial. And this really, 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 and I'm going to write on the board one more time, really symbolizes this argument of the 20s. And this is the theme in the 1920s. We are getting away from traditional thinking, which is that old school kind of thinking, versus modern thinking. Now in this case, and I'm not trying to stir up anything, not trying to be offensive in any way, I'm just explaining the history. We're going to get away from what the traditional thinking, this is going to be the Bible versus science in this part. Now, a lot of modern scholars say, hey, these two things go hand in hand, but back then it was one way or the other. In the 20s and before, it was you either believe in the Bible or you believe in science. And a lot of people were not down with this side. It was all about this, okay? But we get to the 20s and we've come through World War I, we've learned a lot, we've seen a lot, we've experienced a lot, and we start to say, hey, I think this might actually have a larger role than we gave it credit before. So we're going to get this big battle right here between these two ideas of religion versus science. And it comes to light, it actually becomes a real fight in this thing, the Scopes trial of 1925. And what's crazy is this happens right here in Tennessee, and it becomes a nationwide issue, all right? So something that happens in Tennessee gets national attention, and it really embodies what the 20s was all about, this traditional, we're getting away from traditional thinking, we're headed more towards modern thinking. So let's rock and roll. All right, so there was a science teacher, he was actually a substitute teacher, his name was John Scopes, that's him right there, fancy glasses. Cool glasses, dude. By the way, I got into the blue light glasses or whatever. I don't know if they work. My eyes do feel a little bit better. I've been looking at the computer all day long. But anyway, this is John Scopes. In Tennessee, it was illegal to teach the theory of evolution. Now, you know in science class you've learned the theory of evolution because now it is legal. And so back then, this was illegal. You could not teach the idea that humans and other creatures evolve over time and have evolved over a long period of time. And again, I'm just telling you what the trial's about. What you believe is what you believe. That's fine. I'm not trying to step on that in any way, okay? So Scopes teaches the theory of evolution, specifically Darwin's theory of evolution. And it is an uproar. It's a big case. People freak out. He gets arrested, and he gets written a big fine, and these two guys decide, hey, you know what? We're going to make a big scene out of this. And reporters from all over the country come to this place in Tennessee. It's called Ray County, Tennessee, Cleveland area, Tennessee. So it's right outside of Chattanooga, and the Ray County courthouse is where this happened, okay? And you got the two sides. This guy, William Jennings Bryan, we've learned about him before. Remember, he was the Populist Party in 1896, okay? Just an old factoid, throw that at you. From the Granger movement, all that. Remember, he supports silver, okay? He is going to be the traditional side. And then you got this guy. This is Clarence Darrow. He's the lawyer for the teacher. He is the modern side. So it's going to be religion versus science, okay? So this is the argument, and like I said, this is the 1920s boiled down into one big event right here, which is kind of cool, I think. There's going to be this big argument of he taught evolution in a classroom, oh my goodness, whoa, crazy. He gets arrested because of it, and they're going to have this big court case. I mean, they've made movies about this. It's traditional versus modern, traditionalism versus modern, old school style thinking versus new school style thinking, okay? Now, like I said, the state of Tennessee said you cannot teach evolution in schools. They said in the state of Tennessee, you have to teach the Bible's creation story. And actually, this law stayed in effect until like the 1960s, okay? And like I told you a little bit ago, it's this fundamentalism or traditionalism versus modernism. The old school kind of religious style thinking versus the new school scientific thinking. And in the 20s, that is what is going on. This is the big debate of the 20s. So nowadays, in 2020, we've got all kinds of big debates going on, you know, about gun control, different things, all types of big debates going on. And in the 20s, it was still the same thing. They're saying, do we change? Do we stick to this old school style of thinking? Do we stick to this religious style of thinking? Or are we going to move forward? Are we going to look more into science? Are we going to look into a different way of living life, a different way of thinking? And so it really comes down to this. It comes to a big, it's kind of like the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Boom, it explodes and it sets off this big argument. Now, for Tennessee, we started to look really, really bad to the rest of the world and to the rest of America because of this, we had to teach the creation story. The rest of America, particularly the big cities, they were like, you still teach that to your students? And Tennessee's like, well, we're old school, we're rural, we're more of a farming type state. So yes, we do stick to this traditional style of thinking. And people didn't like this. People didn't like the idea of this traditionalism, okay? People didn't like it, all right? Remember, the 1920s were a time of change, okay? Scopes, he is found guilty. I believe he was charged, I think it was something like $25 or something, which back then was a lot of money. But he didn't end up having to pay it. He was later acquitted. And like I said, the Butler Law, this anti-evolutionary teaching, it stays in schools until 1967. So even up until 1967, the creation theory was taught in schools. And I'm not saying that's wrong, it's just it is what it is. Students in Tennessee schools were taught the Bible's version of the creation story rather than the theory of evolution and the Big Bang and all that. And I do believe now if you teach creation in schools, you would get in trouble, okay? So kind of interesting the way things change. But really they don't change because we still have these different kind of debates and things. So old school traditionalism versus new school modernism. And that's what the 20s is all about. The 1920s is a time of change. Technology is changing. Thinking is changing. Women are changing. Everything was changing. And there's a push back against that. That's that traditionalism, okay? So it's pretty cool. The 1920s is a really, really cool time period, all right? And I believe we're done with all the topics, so let's go through the questions. Oh, yeah. So again, so here's the legacy of the case. Again, fundamentalism versus modernism, traditionalism. Traditionalism and fundamentalism are the same thing. Oops, let me write that on there so that way you know. So fundamentalism, aka traditionalism, same thing, all right? Same thing. That's Darwin, by the way. Somebody making fun of him. Traditionalism versus modernism. It brings up this debate, and I'm sure, especially living in Tennessee, that you've had this discussion before. What is right? Is it science or is it religion? We're not going to debate it because I'm just teaching you the history about this case. And it also brings this up, what is the state's role in education? Should the state decide what we learn? The answer is yes, the state does decide what we learn because here's why. The state provides us with money to build our schools and to buy our laptops and to pay for these desks and all that stuff. So the state does pretty much tell us what we have to teach, which is fine. They don't tell us how to teach it, they just tell us what we should teach y'all. And that's cool, it is what it is, so there we go. So this is the big thing, the big takeaway right here though. The 1920s, things are changing and we're getting away from this and we're heading more towards that. All right, cool. Very good, rock and roll. All right, so now we're gonna review and go back everything that we just learned for the 1920s, which is cool, so let's do it. All right, so 3 to 4 new inventions of the 1920s. We get, mainly they all have to do with electricity, so we get refrigerators, automobiles, which is not electricity, but they were a new invention in the 1920s. What else? You saw the recliner, we saw the electric stove, so we'll put a stove on here, so an oven, a toaster, radios. Now, what I mean by that is radios in the home, okay? Radios were around long before this, but radios in the home, okay? There's a lot more. All right, 3 ways new technologies impacted life in the 20s. The biggest one, well, the 2 biggest ones, the ones I want you to remember, life becomes a lot easier. Life is a whole lot easier. Thank goodness. I'm really glad I live in 2020 and not in 1920, because back then they were still learning about all this stuff, still learning how to figure all this out. And now, hopefully it seems like we've got it pretty well figured out. We get something called a consumer culture. That's people buying stuff they don't really need, people buying a lot of stuff. And that's going to lead to something really important, something, well, for history. People went into debt. It's called buying on credit. You say, I'm gonna buy it now, I'm going to take it home today, and I'm going to pay for it later. People went into debt. And the problem with that is one day you've got to pay it back. Uh-oh. People went into debt. D-E-B-T. Okay? So pause there if you need it. Email me if you got questions. And let's rock and roll. All right, now. Automobiles. Automobiles were around before Henry Ford. He's not actually the very first, but he's the first to make them widely available, okay? So Ford used the assembly line to make cars cheaper and more widely available. So now people can buy cars. They're made faster. They're way more available. And this is going to really change the game. This changes life. And there's 3 ways. So first of all, and just one I want to mention because it's the most relevant to y'all, more freedom for the youth. Yeah, good job, youth. Now you get to be free. You get to drive around. You get to drive 95 miles an hour on veterans. I know. Don't even act like you don't. I know. More freedom for youth. Please be careful, though, by the way. For real. Wear your seatbelt and stuff. Okay, more freedom for youth. People travel more. We get rural to urban contacts. And then one big one, it's just going to be a whole lot more money going around. And I'm going to put it in its own little special circle. More money. Because if you think about all the things that have to do with cars in America, okay? And I know we already went over this, but I'm going to just review. So you got, obviously, the car factory where people can work. You got tire factories. You got mechanics shops. You got car parts shops like AutoZone. I don't think AutoZone was around back then, but it is now. Car washes. I mean, think about all the stuff that's related to cars. And it's because of this. The first inventions of cars, the first time cars are really widely available. It's a game changer, man. And it's super cool. It's really awesome for us because we get to inherit this legacy that was started way back then. So really cool. All right, so there you have that. Moving on. Describe a flapper. It's kind of a funny question. What is a flapper? Like on Jeopardy. All right, so you got short hair. What we call risque clothing. The word risque, it sounds like risky. Means like, maybe showing a little more skin. Even though we know back then they didn't really actually show off that much skin compared to nowadays. Risque clothing. They might have smoked and drank. Smoked cigarettes and drank. Y'all better not be doing any of that, by the way. You behave yourselves. Risque clothing, smoked and drank. And really the biggest thing is that they challenged traditional norms. And norms are rules, okay? So they challenged traditional norms. And I want you to really remember that. Mainly because it's going to pop up on a lot of tests. That exact wording is going to pop up on tests, okay? So how did the roles and lives of women change in the 1920s? They have more equality. Think about the right to vote. So more equality because the 19th Amendment, remember the 19th Amendment is the right to vote, okay? Killer handwriting. More equality, more jobs. They could go to college. Okay? That's all very good. Now, we did go over the thing about birth control. That makes me feel weird, so I'm not even going to go there. So, yeah, let's rock and roll. Good? Good. Okie dokie. All right. And let me see. I think this might be our last slide. Yeah. All right, last slide. Yay! Tell me about the Scopes monkey trial. What's the debate between the two sides? So it is the teaching of science versus religion. So religion. So we got the Bible's creation story. The story of Adam and Eve. Okay? And the state of Tennessee said this is what has to be taught in classrooms. And it's kind of crazy because now it's flipped. I think if teachers teach this now, they'll get in big trouble. Versus science. And that is the theory of evolution, Darwin's theory of evolution, that animals and people and everything else change over time. Everything changes over time and evolves, survival of the fittest, all that stuff. So that's the debate, okay? Now the difference between fundamentalism, traditionalism, and modernism, and I'm just going to write it kind of over here and here. So this is the old school, whoops, can't spell, old school, religious-based thinking. And then modernism is going to be your new school, science-based thinking. Okay? Tap, 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 tap. All right. And then number 9, how did the Scopes monkey trial embody the changes in American society? So like I said, the Scopes trial, this guy Scopes teaching about this, and they called it the Scopes monkey trial, which is really just kind of a stupid name. Like that really discounts it and makes it really, it's just not an appropriate name, I don't feel like. But anyway, how did the Scopes monkey trial embody the changes in American society during the 20s? This is like really where it all pops off, where they're saying, hey, we're obviously in an era of change. We've got new inventions. We've got a new culture. Women are doing different things. Everything is changing, and we've got to get away from this fundamentalism or traditionalism, and we got to head more towards this modernist type thinking, okay? So, and if you want to just write that, that's fine. So, this was, let's just write it. It's just traditionalism versus modernism, okay? Let's just write that, because I feel like that sums it up pretty well. Traditionalism versus modernism. And what it means, old school, old way of doing things. This is how we did things before 1920. This is how we did things before we had World War I. This is the old way. This is the 1800s. Guess what? Now we're in the 1900s. We got electricity. We don't care what women are up to. We're changing the game. We have a culture. We're driving around in cars. It's new school time period, okay? So it's an old school way of thinking versus a new school way of thinking. And I've written that a bunch of times, so I'm not going to write it again, but there you have it. All right, so the 1920s, a really fantastic time period in American history. It's really fun. It's really cool. I highly suggest you look up other videos about this. I don't know the rules about me showing other YouTube videos on my YouTube. It's probably definitely illegal. So you look it up on your own. I definitely highly suggest you do some more research. Look at some pictures and things. Really cool time period in history. Hopefully you learned a lot. Electricity, different things, new culture, everything changes in 1920, and it's a golden age in American history. And it's a good thing it's a golden age, because the 30s is not a golden age, and then the 40s really is not. So yeah, so it's very good. Visit my website and download this. Email me with any questions, and I think that's it. Guys, have a great day. Let me know if you need anything, and yeah, I'll be around. Bye!